So before we even get started, I started watching the My Next Life as a Villainess.
Oh, you did?
The one you were recommending. Did you watch any of it?
I've watched everything that's available. So up until today, it is episode 8.
I'm like 5 episodes in. It's not much to talk about, to be honest. It's kind of as shallow as I expected it to be.
But it's like lighthearted fun. Like going from
It is absolutely. But like, I guess the reason why I'm harping on you in particular about it is like, when I ask you for a show, specifically for this podcast, I'm like, give me something that I can talk about, and then you hand me. It's like I'm like, okay, give me a restaurant to critique, and then you point me to the movie theater and say, go get the popcorn. It's like, it's not material, Brando.
I think
it's just not material.
It could be. It could be. Honestly, you think you can't make a popcorn review? You think you're fucking too good for that?
It's not that I'm too good for it. It's that I know it's gonna come out bland, just like the popcorn that it is.
The fuck out of here. I think that there is something there, but again, I passed on a recommendation from my own receiving of a recommendation. It was a second hand,
but you're still fucking responsible for those recommendations.
It was second hand. I had only watched the pilot at that point.
It was secondhand recommendations, man.
Yeah. Anyway,
secondhand recommendations don't cause lung cancer.
Yeah, but apparently they can fuel anime podcast episodes. Alright, fuck it.
Alright, we're going into this.
What is up, Internet? It's your boys, Brando and Christopher House. I hope you guys are doing well. Welcome to the Otaku Remix Podcast. Chris, what are we doing today? I didn't read the thumbnail.
You didn't read the thumbnail that you made? So today we are doing something that was kind of requested by a few of our fans, like I would say almost a year ago at this point.
A while ago.
Yeah, and doing our top 5 anime series that we have watched ourselves.
Yes.
Helping to further expose the anime amateur that I am.
Yeah, for you specifically. No, now I'm like covering my ass already immediately. I'm like, I got a full my anime list watched. You could check it. I'll link it in the description.
It was fun going through that. You said that your list was like 150 shows long.
Yeah, and even before we started this, I was like going through and adding more. I'm like, man, because I was trying to do a final check of anything I may have forgotten about. But if you kind of forgotten about it, it's probably not going to be in your top 10. Potentially. That, or I'm just like a goldfish memory human being. But it's somewhere in the range between like 150 to 170. And yours is like somewhere around like the 100 mark, I think, right? Or...
Not even. It's at 55.
Okay. That's good though. That's like, you know, that's
good. You're still pure. You're not tainted by the swamps of the anime industry.
Something like that. You definitely are a little bit more picky about what you ingest from a media standpoint than most human beings, so that number isn't exactly strange when I hear that. So it's fine.
I also started off. I started only watching anime when I was in like college, so I didn't start till I was like 21.
Yeah,
something like that.
And that's fine, you know, because in general now you have a better idea of your tastes when it comes to stories and whatever the fuck, you know. A lot of people like myself will kind of waste, 10, 26 episodes watching, garbage, and I'm glad you get to keep those hours of your life, but we're not talking about the wastes. We're talking about the things that we were rewarded with, the anime and the stories.
The treasure that we find in the garbage.
Yes. We wade through hours and hours and hours of complete dog shit, just to find these little nuggets. And so here we are. We're gonna do a little quick top 5 for you. So basically the format, and obviously, I hate saying this because it's so repetitive, but spoilers for everything moving forward. Probably light in nature because we're just really going to go over some of the lighter elements because we have so many series to kind of run through. But obviously, light spoilers ahead for everything that we talk about for these multiple series, etc. You've been warned. Covering asses. Moving on, but we're going to go.
I think we're going to try to do timestamps for each of the anime that we cover.
Yes, I love work. Okay.
So if you hear an anime that you don't want to be spoiled on, feel free to look in the details below, description below, and you can skip to the next anime on the list.
Yeah. So they'll have it all linked down in the description for you guys to kind of parse through if you'd like. But yeah, we'll go in ascending order, starting from 5, moving towards 1. We'll bank off of each other regarding which one is our individual. Again, these are not objective, or rather even attempts to be objective interpretations of these anime. Again, we're talking about art, we're talking about anime, so being objective is silly inherently, but I digress. But yeah, no, these are just purely based on me and Chris's personal experiences with these stories, what they've meant to us, why we enjoyed them so much, and these are basically our personal top fives. We hope you guys enjoy just hearing these thoughts, and maybe if you empathize with them, we can have a conversation down in the doobly-doo below. But yeah, so without further ado, let's just get right into it. Chris, you have first serve, as it were.
Oh, okay.
You go ahead.
Well, we can knock this one out. We can knock this one out easily because we already talked about it. We already did it. Because my fifth favorite series is BEASTARS.
BEASTARS. Zootopia Diet, or Zootopia, the Dr. Pepper to the Mr.
Is it Diet? I thought this was a better version of Zootopia.
This is the Dr.
Zootopia
Pepper
is like,
to the Mr. Pibb.
Zootopia is like the whitewash version of BEASTARS. You know, it's like, yeah, don't worry about stuff like, procreation or, like
yeah.
racial divides. Don't worry about that stuff. Like it's I don't know. Anyway, BEASTARS, yeah, we talked about it not even 2 podcasts ago or something like that. But it's quickly become one of my favorites, mostly for a lot of reasons. It's kind of affirmed my belief that 3D animation is truly getting better, at least in Japan.
Yeah, no.
You can have a long form series, not just an animated feature, but a long form series in 3D, and have it look good and give off really good performances, and stay at a standard of quality that is kind of acceptable, that is equivalent to, if not even better than, its 2D counterparts. Not to mention the really unique story that you don't really like. As I said before, it's a female author, and I think that really helps push its unique perspective that you wouldn't see from a lot of other male mangaka in the industry. And then to top it all off, it just has a bitchin' soundtrack. That's going to be kind of a theme in a lot of my shows, is that they have either really good soundtracks or really good like music editing or sound effects or stuff like that. That's really an important factor to me. But yeah, BEASTARS, without a doubt, my number 5 on this top 5 list.
Yeah, no, super solid series. Again, what you said, I hugely empathize with the advent of CGI, of it being a 3D anime, where it's like competent, it's fluid, it definitely never pulls you out of the experience with any sort of wooden animation, so it's definitely well produced in that regard. And it's one of the few anime in the last like 5 years or so, a good comparative point for me would be like Bunny Senpai, where like on the exterior, the marketing for it and the perception I have of it and like the tropes surrounding it turned me off from an exterior standpoint. Like looking at Bunny Senpai, just reading the title, I was like, this is garbage. And then if my cousin didn't step in and be like, watch it, it's actually well written and nice. And then both of us in turn eventually watch it and we're like, oh wow, this is actually kind of quality. And then same thing with BEASTARS. From the exterior, it's like 3D anime, furries, and like high school, and like just these like really melodramatic elements,
and a romantic triangle.
Yeah, with a deer, and I'm like, why am I doing this to myself? And then like suddenly one of my best friends is like, give it a shot. I'm like, oh man, this better be another slam dunk, otherwise I'm gonna be pretty pissed off. But it was
it to you? Okay, it was a slam dunk because it's not on your top.
It's
5.
not on my top 5. Granted.
That's okay. I was just making sure that you still enjoy it.
I absolutely enjoyed
more
it.
Than just acceptable degree.
Absolutely, definitely not like a 6 out of 10. Like definitely something exceptional as far as what BEASTARS did. I feel like it didn't exactly. Again, the arcs of that BEASTARS story, the manga stretch much further than the Netflix series that we watched. So I've been assured by deep cut BEASTARS fans that we'll be receiving some closure to some of the dropped plot threads and some of the kind of emptiness of the ending, like some of the stuff we talked about in our podcast, which you should check out, which we'll have linked maybe in below, who knows. But overall, very good series. I have no problems and kind of expected it to be somewhere close to your top 5, so that definitely makes good sense. but I think it sounds like the emptiness is moving towards my top 5. It sounds like you're passing the serve to me, and my serve is for Haikyuu.
Haikyuu?
The volleyball.
No, this is the volleyball
Yes,
one,
yes.
Okay. Now does your appreciation for the show include to the current season?
Absolutely. I think that the consistency of quality, this is all the way season 1 to what is considered now season 4. And season, I was going to get into the doobly-doo of like season 3 being just one match, but it doesn't fucking matter. Overall, all of Haikyuu is my top 5, is my 5th. Mm-hmm. And this is hard for me again. Like, there's a lot of anime that I've consumed over the course of my life, and to cut it down to 5 was just, somewhat challenging. You kind of sent me your list at like 1 a.m. last night, something around that, and I didn't get back to you till like 4 a.m. because I like had been deliberating between 2 and 4 a.m. between like whatever was on my anime list, and I'm like, this is so dumb, but it means something to me. Anyway, I've arrived at Haikyuu. I'm putting some qualifiers on it, being like, this is just my opinion today. And also, all the other sports anime and things of similar nature that I feel like Haikyuu does good, and also things that do comparatively well, like Ippo, like Kuroko no Basket, etc., are all great. But today, Haikyuu is the number 5 because it's just really, really fun. It's lighthearted. It's inspiring. I feel like a big reason why I enjoy sports anime, and there is another one on this list for me, which is good in a very different way, honestly, but done by the same production studio. But the elements that make a sports anime great are obviously the quality shonen elements. They try to like the kind of young man motivation elements, determination, I should say, coming of age. I really like the endearing cast of characters. Like, the team elements of sports are super important, and the team that they have that surround the main cast of Haikyuu, obviously the protagonist, Hinata Shoyo, and then the kind of sort of dual protagonist, Kageyama. They make an incredible tandem. They bounce off each other. They're both incredibly flawed, and that really helps them have this really good symmetry, synergy, with each other. Mm-hmm. The show itself is not like it's not like other sports anime in the sense that it is not like, let's just say, Ice Shield 21, Kuroko no Basket, these basketball and football animes where like things, or Prince of Tennis, where things are so exacerbated and like made extreme.
Exacerbated? You mean exaggerated?
Exaggerated and like made hyperbolic, extreme. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, I'm basically Dragon Ball Z with football. Like, I'm like.
Well, yeah, because like in a lot of sports anime, like it's the part that usually deters me from watching it, is like they will make shit up.
Oh yeah,
to an enormous degree, and like for some reason I'm okay with it in Ippo because it's almost like symbolic of real boxing.
Yeah,
like there's a tandem there at least.
Yeah.
But like with other sports anime, it's just like, yeah, he's so big on the football field, he just turns into a tank, and then he like literally turns into a tank, and you're like, what the fuck is happening? For me, anymore?
Okay, so here's what's happening there. For me, I enjoy that. I really love that, honestly. Like, everything I mentioned, those anime that are in contrast to Haikyuu, I love that because I feel like it simulates and emulates the feeling that athletes feel performing, like their feats of strength and skill, and the same way that the audience kind of feels like how hype it is. Like, when I see, like, Steph Curry, Dame Lillard fucking cross up a dude and break his ankles, it is akin to like how I like imagine Akashi in Kuroko no Basket feels when he uses the Emperor Eye to like fucking break ankles. It's that sort of impersonation or impression in the anime that kind of communicates that feeling. So I feel like it's validated in a sort of way, and obviously just from a pure visual entertainment element, it's obviously fun, but Haikyuu steps away from that. It's more grounded. Okay. It's honestly, it mixes many slice of life elements, not only into its characterization, but into its games. The volleyball games are strategic, they're grounded, but that's honestly what gives them like huge payoff. And the last thing I'll just say before we move on to the next one is the art and the animation, extremely solid, extremely beautiful, done by Studio IG, which has done incredibly fluid animation for other sports and other great series. Welcome to the Ballroom, Kuroko no Basket, Broken Blade, the list goes on. But yeah, it's it's just a really fun, really enjoyable experience that I've gotten a lot of good mileage out of. So that's my number 5.
Mm-hmm. Do you want to talk a bit more about why you love sports anime so much, or do you want to save that for when you bring up another sports anime in this top 5?
I think that, in general, and I'm just going to put it out there for anybody listening, I'm going to do some sort of sports anime video separate from the podcast, something that kind of, that's separate from the podcast. It just kind of outlines that, because I feel like there's a lot of ideas and thoughts there. But, like, in essence, there's definitely a deep appreciation in myself, because I feel like for a long time, it was like a maligned, underachieving genre within the anime community. And then lately, as of the last 5, almost 10 years now, it's become like it's kind of had a renaissance, and it's become much more widely accepted. You have multiple series such as Haikyuu becoming global successes, Kuroko no Basuke, Free, list goes on, Ace of Diamond, blah, 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 blah. And there are reasons for that. I think that they've not only discovered ways to optimize the niche, but there's things that I'd like to go over in that video that we don't have the time for right now. But it's a good question. I'm glad you asked it.
Okay, all right, we'll move on then.
Yes. So you, at your number 4, just outside, right off the pedestal, almost making it through.
I was stuck between 2 things with number 4, because I definitely wanted to talk about BEASTARS, and I think if I wasn't so adamant in advertising it, I probably would have had this. I was stuck between 2 shows. I was stuck between ReZero, which is one of the more recent shows I've watched, and this show, which is my number 4. So my number 4 is Mob Psycho 100. In particular, the second season, because the first season didn't really grip me all too much. And then towards the end of that season, it kind of all clicked for me. I understood what the author was going for. And then the second season just ran with it. And it's really impressive to see a series that has a second season that doesn't run away from the ideas that are brought up in the first one, and instead develops and almost profoundly I don't even know how to describe it. Mob Psycho feels, before I get too far, ReZero, great show. Unfortunately, it just doesn't match up to Mob Psycho 100, so that's why it's not on this list. But anyway, Mob Psycho, I think people are much more familiar with the show One Punch Man, done by the same mangaka. But whereas One Punch Man is kind of this, pun intended, one-hit joke, Mob is a bit more deeper about its premise. It has a similar kind of premise where you have your protagonist be the strongest, person on the face of the planet. But in Mob's case, it's him trying to exist within a society very similar to ours. He's still trying to just live his life as a high schooler and find his place in society, because he doesn't want to be an all-powerful being. And it's him trying to discover his identity in spite of the identity that is forced upon him with his powers. And the narrative that narrative is so interesting, and the second season runs on that so well that it really stands out. And I'd be okay if we didn't get any more adventures of Mob Psycho, to be honest. The show ends on such a high note that that you can already tell where the characters would go on from this point. You know what I mean? Assuming that other cataclysmic events that are worth talking about happen. You can already tell how Mob is going to develop as a young man into a member of society, and you can tell where his boss is going to go, and you can tell how society as a whole is going to deal with people such as him. I think that's what really stands out for me, to be honest, because the comedy, I didn't list any real true comedies on this top 5, because I feel like comedy, unless it's satirizing a really prominent social event, or social conditioning that's occurring within our time, I don't think comedy has a lasting appeal to me. as it does to maybe some other people, because it just doesn't stick in my mind. It doesn't stay there and make me think about it constantly. It entertains me in the moment, but it doesn't entertain me in the long form. But Mob Psycho, despite being a comedy, is a really, really interesting character story. And so that's why it kind of found its way onto number 4 for me.
Yeah, no, I think that the comedy element, actually, the thing that it does sort of satirize, it doesn't satirize anything specifically about IRL, real life politics or anything about the, socioeconomics of life, but it does kind of satirize something within the culture of anime. It definitely is a parody, just like One Punch Man, of the shonen tropes. It definitely takes those expectations and subverts them constantly, which I think makes it an interesting critique of the genre while being at the same time a fantastic example of the genre, which is one of the interesting dualities of Mob Psycho. Mob Psycho also skirted being on my top 5 as well. It's one of, I think that a lot of people that I speak about, and honestly I have really no qualm saying that it's basically a modern classic when it comes to anime. I think it does everything that One Punch Man does, but does it better. It has
in a weird sense, because One Punch Man has higher highs to not with a huge power gap, but like the laughs you get out of One Punch Man are a lot more extreme. But man, those valleys in which like you realize that there's no important characters in this show is like kind of detrimental to it in the long run. There's not really much to think about in terms of the show. It ends up being the show that your friends quote all the time, but nobody really wants to talk about.
Yeah, I think that that's a good way to basically sum up the differences between the two. I think that One Punch Man, if we're going to compare the two from the same creator, but they have their respective differences, and that being that One Punch Man is like much more absurd and buys into the joke, and is basically more or less the foundation of One Punch Man is the joke. Of how it is kind of like a subversion of the shonen genre, whereas Mob Psycho is that, but plus the benefit of actually having like laser focused, really good character development, and actually creates interesting drama from that in the character of Mob specifically. He has a lot more depth, I think, and he's a lot more dimension to him than somebody like Saitama, who
definitely
obviously he has elements to him. There are definitely some. It's not like he's completely flat character, but Mob is infinitely more interesting because of all the different. Because his a great thing about him is that his power comes from his emotions. So that makes a great synergy with his character to see how that kind of transpires into physical manifestations throughout the series.
But it's funny because you say that they come from his emotions, but I don't like. They don't really. They are influenced by his emotions greatly, but. As the character develops, you start to learn that his emotions aren't him. Like, he is not the individual reactions that he has in the moment. He is the person that he chooses to be by the end of the show. And that's what's really, really pleasant about it. Is like, that is watching him become that person and understanding what sort of strange influences lead him to that conclusion. Like, I won't lie, the first season I dropped off on it really quickly because I hated his boss. I thought his boss was like the biggest piece of shit, and I hated him. And towards the end of that first season, I realized but he does have like something decent to say to this kid, and he is something to him. And I don't know. I apologize for being so vague about this, but it has been a little bit since I've seen this show. But definitely probably on my highest in terms of casual recommendations, aside from number 1 on the list. But I think we should move forward.
No worries. All right. Yeah, definitely a solid recommendation all the same. I know a lot of people out there have seen Mob, so we'll see where they put theirs if they ever give us their top 5s. But yeah, moving on towards mine. My top 5, pretty different comparatively to Mob as far as setting and tone. But my number 4 anime is Vinland Saga.
So before you even go into Vinland Saga, I want you to tell the people what you bumped off your list for Vinland Saga. Because I want to see I want to see the fires in the comments if we get any.
Yeah. You know what's fucking better than Vinland Saga? Or Vinland Saga is better than Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood. Get that shit out of here. But you know, I respect deeply Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood, just to preface that. I really like that series, honestly, too. I have an attachment to that series.
Obviously, you had it on your list originally, but...
But there's something about Vinland Saga, and again, this is extremely recent anime, 2019, so, like, as fresh as it comes. Manga's been out for a long time, considered to be one of the great 4 senins, really, of all time, you know, between Berserk, Vinland Saga, Kingdom, and, damn it, the one with the samurai, Vagabond.
Oh, yeah.
But, yeah, Vinland Saga, when I kind of thought about the totality of it, it left a stronger impression on me, at least the first season of Vinland Saga, than Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood, because in Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood, again, huge, wonderful world building, characters, 60 episodes, blah, 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 blah. You know, everybody knows.
Some people consider it the best anime of all time. Start throwing dynamite.
Yeah, I know, like, but no, it's just the characters. For me, for a guy that has only dabbled in the seinen genre here or there, you know, there are some fantastic stories within that sort of like mature, gritty world. Monster, incredible triumph. That should honestly be in my top 5, but maybe my regrets will come in later. Berserk, obviously, being one of the most well-known senins, and then you also have stuff like Claymore out there, etc., etc. For me, Vinland Saga, after watching the anime, I dove into the manga. It really has become kind of the definitive series that strikes that tone for me. There's just so much about it that's really engrossing and impressive. Like the setting, you know, set in basically 11th century England with the Nordic culture, kind of on their conquest. It's so grounded, like many seinen. It's just got this really painfully empathetic element to it when it comes to some of the civil, like the liberties it takes with what, you know, drives people, obviously, even back then when it's a lot more, much more of a savage world. But yeah, no, it's just, I don't know, it's just the strange beauty of it all. The character development, you know, Thorfinn being the protagonist, he is a very interesting character. I did the whole video also on why I thought at the time Vinland Saga was the best anime of 2019, and that still stands, but I was just like so overcome with my impression of the show that I was like, I gotta put something out there. So that's out on the YouTubes if you guys want to check it out. Another shameless plug. But in essence, a lot of these ideas are going to be reharped here, where I feel like there's a lot of great character development, not only with Thorfinn, the protagonist, who could have just been like this sort of atypical, moody teenager archetype in anime. Instead, he has a lot of dimension from how he becomes this sort of very happy-go-lucky kid who lives like a pretty boring life in like Norway or Greenland, excuse me, or Iceland. Damn it, I'm getting all the geography messed up.
Wow.
Anyway, but you know, it goes from this sort of happy-go-lucky kid to this like vicious mercenary killer. You know how like life has basically stripped away everything from him, and even though his father Thor's wanted basically to set him up to be this like very honorable, wholesome human being, how life has, you know, basically scarred him to the point where he's no longer seeing anything besides the eyes of revenge. And then there's also in the first season basically, for essentially there is a second protagonist, and that's the character of Askeladd, who's also just as deep, just as interesting, the sort of surrogate father figure for Thorfinn, who killed his actual father, etc., etc. So there's a lot of interesting elements of that. The action, extremely exciting. It does use a little bit of the 3D animation, and it does it beautifully. That's one thing that people were really dreading, honestly, when they saw trailers for Vinland Saga, because it's one of the great 4 seinen, and Berserk 2016 marred by 3D animation. Yeah. The adaptation of Kingdom, which is a 3D anime, complete garbage. So
really?
Like, are we gonna take?
Interesting. Because when I was looking through on my anime list, people like Kingdom was highly regarded, so I'm surprised to hear that.
And then we take finally Vinland Saga. They're like, oh my god, they're gonna ruin Vinland Saga with shitty 3D animation, and they didn't. So hooray! Behold. Yeah, so we got 1 of 3 so far, and yeah, no, I was extremely happy. So the action is really intense. It's exciting. The art and animation beyond that, in the 2D element is also extremely good. It kind of almost at times, for me, evokes a sort of almost Attack on Titan vibe to it. And actually, I think on top of that, this is the same studio that did Attack on Titan, Wit Studio.
Oh, is it? Yeah, they're very talented.
Yeah.
They're not great at managing their budgets, but when they go full horse, it's real good shit. So
yeah.
I'll have to give Vinland Saga another shot. I don't know why I dropped off on it. I think I just got caught up in other stuff, but
I think it's really well paced. It starts as a little bit of a slow burn, but I think that once you get your the tracks are laid, it really gets moving in a beautiful way. So I think that everybody out there, including yourself, Chris, should go ahead and get yourself. Also, the music, fantastic. The score is wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. I'd have to find the composer for that, or at least the team behind that music, but the music in Vinland Saga is also, it perfectly sets the right amount of emotional tension and context to like every scene. It's very melancholic when it needs to. There's soft piano that really emphasizes a lot of moments in particular that I can think of just emotionally, or rather throughout my memory. But the music in the show is also top notch. But moving on.
Fair enough. So we get to my number 3, which man, this is where I was like struggling a bit, but I think I picked the right one. Am I gonna have to? I'll just announce it then. So my pick for my third favorite anime of all time is the ongoing series JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. It's, yeah, I know. Don't. you cannot match the glorious sound effects and music that this series has. So like, JoJo's, I feel like everybody knows about JoJo's at this point. It's like impossible to find anybody who's into anime and has not either seen an episode or seen a meme or like seen a compilation of clips out of context and stuff like that. And so it's kind of hard to figure out a new way to talk about it. But to be honest, like looking back on the show, and we're talking about the show in particular, not the manga.
Yeah.
It's interesting how the production team decided that instead of putting all their effort into trying to make these iconic panels of manga history, instead of trying to make them animate in this new and artistic way, instead they said, you know what, no. Add as much color as you can, get the best voice actors you can find, get a bitchin' soundtrack in every scene, and not only that, but make sure that your character theme is rewritten in like 20 different ways so that every episode has a different take on the theme, and then add amazing sound effects, and suddenly your sparsely animated show, which I'll be honest, this one is, your sparsely animated show is like suddenly incredibly lively and vibrant and perfect for the memes. Like it's really hard to describe how much effort is put into this show outside of the actual animation. And I think that's so interesting and so cool. I mean, like, I think to some people it's a little off-putting, and I've had some people who've actually like generally dislike the show because of how stiff it can be at times, but like I don't know, there's just something about it that like this is not even talking about the zaniness of the plot and like the crazy places that these characters either go or change entirely, or like the unique abilities that stands are entirely. Like there's so many things you can talk about JoJo, but for me, what brings me back all the time is the production of the show. I cannot state how good the voice actors are that they find and how much passion they put into, like, everybody's overacting to the nth degree, but it's great. Like it's like one of those, it's like a campy show that everybody is trying their best to make as artistic and creative as possible. Yeah, it's so fantastically done. Like I can't stop stating that.
No, man.
In particular, the most recent season has been surprisingly good. It's Gold Wind or Vento Oreo is, I don't want to say it's a black sheep of the series, but it's like considered the low point to a lot of people, and
Really?
I think at least that was it to me, and I had a few people agree with me when I was talking about it, but lo and behold, when it came time to do the show, it was found out that either the executive producer or the director was like that was his favorite part, and so they just ran with it, and it's like it's now my favorite part of the current production, like it's just oh man. I'm leaving a lot of my sentences trailing because I feel like it's really hard without a script in front of you to describe what makes this series so unique.
No,
and so
I get it.
Particularly
A
good.
lot of yeah, what you're saying as far as like the universal buy-in of the production and the actors and the overall presentation of JoJo and like how all of it is so saturated and so fucking bright and so over the top and so like it's very unique. There is nothing really like JoJo, really, not only in anime, but just like in popular cultural media that I've seen really ever. Like just something as flamboyant and flashy and gaudy
without being
and like
offensive about it either. It's like sometimes when you're marketed those runway shows and stuff like that with all the models, they try to really overplay like the flamboyant nature that it has, but like
yeah.
but like this show is just so earnest about it. Like there are men who act like manly men, and they're just like, oh yeah, like I work 7 days a week and I build for my family and whatnot. But they're wearing like fashion model clothes, and it's amazing. Like
Yeah, no, there's just this weird like dichotomy
weird,
of like
yeah, of
like
you were saying
omega
the
muscle
dichotomy.
dudes, yeah.
Yeah,
Like Dragon Ball Z characters wearing like drag outfits almost or like high fashion outfits basically.
but they look great
And
in them.
no, they look fantastic and they bend over backwards in like the most absurd pose.
Mm-hmm.
And then we fight with magical like stands, like it's just like
And
it's the strangest thing.
The weirdest part is like, you can bring up certain shows where every panel is made for a certain reason to express certain emotions, and in this show it's like I would say 80% of the time that's the case, but a good 20% of the time it's like, oh, I just did this for the lulz, or I thought this looked good, like this is Eric I put this panel in because it matches a certain artistic value, and it's like, man, what the fuck? There's later in part 7. I'm sorry, I'm going off the rails here, but in part 7, there's a person that they gain the power of the golden ratio.
Yeah.
It's an artistic term and somewhat of an architectural term, I believe, but it's a specific term only for artists. It's not really, it doesn't really have any value outside of like visual arts, and that's the character. That's like your main protagonist's power is harnessing the golden ratio. So it's one of these things where it's like Araki is such an artist at heart, but he never sticks to one thing. He's always trying out new things while always staying on the line. You're always wondering if he's just gonna fall off that tightrope into the volcano, and he never does. It's fantastic, and the production only elevates out everything. So that's why I'm surprised it's only at number 3 for me, but the other two are just too iconic for me to not put at top 2. So yeah, JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, solid number 3. I really look forward to when they eventually do Stone Ocean, because Stone Ocean Part 6 is also a bit of a low point in the series for me. But like I'm looking forward to their interpretation of it. So
yeah. Nah, I'm extremely fond of JoJo's as well. Not nearly as much as you, because like you definitely have dived in much deeper into the pool than I have. But like I truly wholeheartedly appreciate like the very earnest. It's like such a pure form of expression when it comes to Araki. It's so shameless and like that's beautiful in its own way. So like that's the beauty of it. The fact that it is so proud about every absurdity. And that's part of the reason why, not that it made it into my top 5, but it's kind of, I think, a part of the beauty of Baki the Grappler, in his like very wholehearted, earnest appreciation of like martial arts in the same way. But yeah,
it's a bit more specific for Baki, but I can see that nonetheless.
Yeah, it's like, it's very charming in the way that it just kind of buys into itself when something does buy into itself, no matter how crazy it gets.
It's honestly like appropriately naming. It's like watching David Bowie perform, where it's like this person who totally believes in everything that they're doing, and not to an egotistical sense, but just in a performance sense. I feel like it's watching art at its truest form. But anyway, before I exaggerate too much further, why don't you go to number 3, or else I'm gonna just spooge more for this show.
Spooge. All right, so at the bronze medal for myself.
Oh, don't call it the bronze medal.
It is the bronze medal. It's an honorable.
I don't want to say. I don't want to say I give JoJo's a bronze medal.
JoJo got the bronze. It's on the podium. Fuck. Dude, it's an honorable podium. It's an honorable podium.
If you're in third place, you lost.
You're the second loser, yeah. So, but yeah, on the podium for me is Run with the Wind. Another fairly recent anime in the last 2-3 years. Run with the Wind is another sports anime, admittedly. For you, I know that you haven't seen it, so just quick synopsis for most people who probably haven't seen it, because I think it is criminally underrated. But it's a competitive running anime in college, set in college. The main character effectively is this young man named Kakeru Kurihara, who, entering college, has no desire to basically return to sports after basically being a very traumatic high school years. But after sort of an impromptu shoplifting episode, he runs into a young man named Haiji, who basically introduces him to a dorm. They both go to the same college, and at the dorm, there's a total of 10 young men living at this dorm. Haiji basically tells them all, hey, this dorm is the track team clubhouse, and all of you living here have to basically participate in the track team if you want to keep living here for cheap. And so it becomes this mission for all of them to basically perform one of the hardest, most iconic runs in Japanese culture, the Hakone Ekiden. Basically, the marathon on New Year's Day. The college marathon basically runs through and up the iconic mountain of Hakone. And so it's a huge feat in college sports. You have to qualify for it. There's a lot of things. So, and basically he's doing it with a bunch of running novices. So this story isn't very visceral. It isn't very much like really any other sports anime I've ever watched. And the reason why it kind of made it up here is because it truly is. I don't think there really is any other sports drama that is this good. It's extremely, I think it's a very extremely rare and beautiful thing to get that, because in general, I think there's already inherent obstacles that it was kind of playing against. Now, because running is not the sort of thing that I think in general lends itself well to anime or to drama in general. It's a largely solitary affair. There's no direct conflict. You don't tactically engage with your opponents. It's pretty repetitive when you think about it. The only thing you're doing is basically managing your overall tank of energy. You're not really overcoming complex obstacles, so what is
I think a lot of track runners would fight you on that.
No, but I wasn't track. I definitely, for 2 years in high school, I was that guy. I ran yeah. So I've been there. I lived that life for a short period of time. So I understand. And so that is part of the reason why I empathize with it. But a great part of the show's depth comes from the characters. There's just an incredible characterization of the 10 characters that make up the full team. A lot of the early episodes basically comprise Haiji convincing all of them through nefarious or otherwise means to just participate in practices and basically get bought in. But you slowly watch all these apathetic naysayers slowly kind of transition into dedicated runners, and it's mostly through an exploration of all of their individual characters, all their individual backgrounds, all the details that kind of comprise them, and what possesses them to take on this endeavor. Mm-hmm. It's a lot of it's a show that's kind of more built on the interactions between the people and their individual struggles and the consequential, responsibilities of being on the team and their interactions with each other and how they kind of basically domino their motivations onto each other. And so there isn't so much this, like I mentioned earlier, it's very aesthetic, it's very beautiful, it's not very kinetic, it's not very action orientated like other sports anime. It is produced by the same studio that did Haikyuu, that does Welcome to the Ballroom, Production IG. So it's extremely beautiful. The color work, the very inviting backgrounds, incredible character animation. It's all there, but it all kind of portrays this much more grounded expression of the body and the body language and the running gaits, and all of it just looks fantastic. So the reason for me that it's so high is mostly because of I really do like sports anime across the board. So there is a bedrock.
You exhale like it's a reluctant admission of guilt.
There's a bedrock of interest when it comes to athletics for Brando, just in general. And I mean across the board. But I think this is a side of it that's typically overlooked. And it's the introspective side.
I'm sorry, I lost your train of thought. What is the side that is overlooked?
The introspective element of sport. I think that there's
what
obviously
the sport means to the individual.
Yes. Okay. A lot of, and if not a majority of the subject matter when it comes to Run with the Wind is the communication of what a team is. Like in running, again, it's like you think it's alone, but in this anime, they basically teach, or rather it slowly becomes more apparent, the necessity for teammates, and then also what the running means to each individual. Like the very first line of the anime, you just see just a dark alleyway, the wind's blowing past, and you learn that you see Kakeru running, and then you see suddenly Haiji show up next to him, who's chasing him down on his bike, and the first lines of the show are, "Do you like to run?" But I really don't think he's asking, "Do you like to run?" in a sort of yes or no inquiry. It's more of, because by the end of it all, that's the same line they end on, "Do you like to run?" Almost facing the audience when asking it. It's more of by the end of it, it's sort of, why do you run?
Right.
Because in the final Ekiden, in the actual marathon, they're all basically coming to grips with why they did this, because a lot of different reasons brought them all there individually, and it's sort of not only what does running mean to the individual as far as taking up a sport, but taking on challenges, taking up these types of these hurdles in life. And it's just, I don't know, a lot of that emotional baggage and the way it's described, the way that it's written, the dialogue between the characters is incredibly it's just so poised in everything that it does. It's not very dramatic in the sense that it's not melodramatic, I should say. There's nothing super gaudy about it. It's just it naturalistically portrays how people face adversity, learn to love each other, and I don't know. It was a very touching story to me on a lot of levels, and to the point where I was like, you know what, I'm gonna put it right here at the third.
That's fair. I mean, to be honest, out of all the sports anime you've described to me, and I'm gonna be real for a second with the audience here, Brando talks to a lot of sports anime to me, a fair amount. I should say more than one, and every time I don't want to say I grin and bear it, but it's when I start talking about shit you just don't really care about. It's you appreciate it and you can respect it, but at the same time it's man, this is just not for me.
I'm trying to think of what those things are. You sit there
and you respect it. There's probably few, because I'm so self-conscious of that stuff that if I get a whiff that you're not interested, I'll never talk about it. But of all the sports anime you've talked to me about and that you've shown to me, this one has probably been the most interesting to me. Mostly because when you mentioned that most of the crew are kind of forced into this sport, and that they need to figure out what this means to them without it being their entire life, Like, for most
Yeah.
sports anime, I always see it as the protagonist and the rest of the crew are like trying to be the best of the best. And it's almost not relatable because it feels like that's their entire life. You know what I mean? Whereas, like, where I'm at in life, I have many hobbies, but none of them are my livelihood, or none of them are, like, what I can devote my entire life to.
Mm-hmm.
And so that kind of makes a distance between me and those sports animes that are like, the livelihood is this sport is our life and stuff like that. But with Run with the Wind, it seems much more like, how are we incorporating this sport into our lives, and how does this affect our lives, and like, stuff like that. So I think if I was going to give any of them a shot, I would probably give this one a shot first.
I think that also one thing that a reason why I enjoyed so much, it's kind of like that. Obviously, like I mentioned many times in many ways so far, is that introspective element to it, but it's that search for purpose. There's like a very colloquial, thought and concept amongst the Japanese called ikigai, which basically translates to reason for being. It's a word that refers to having a direction or purpose in life that makes one's life meaningful, and worthwhile. And the actions that the individual takes towards spontaneous, like, willing of the satisfaction in your own meaning. And so I feel like this is sort of the exploration of that ideal of ikigai, of basically finding reasons for being, because a lot of these individuals in the show, in Run with the Wind, are not entirely aimless, but they're lost in some capacity, or they're struggling with something that they can't overcome, whether it's familial
you kind
issues.
of have to be if you're able to be tricked into attracting
something like that. Yeah, the house they live in is cheap. That's the dorm. They're like, oh man, this is great. Haiji cooks for us. They're all like domesticated, and then like by the time that he like flips it, it's like, shit, he fucking tricked all of us. And so at first he's very mischievous about it, but then like he basically tries to naturalistically and earnestly approach them. It's like, what is it that you need, or like, what is it that you're struggling with? And
that's something cool. I don't know, at least on the FGC side of things, a very slight tangent, I'll get off it in a second, but on the FGC side of things, I can relate to that, because there are a lot of people who are like, why do I even want to continue pursuing this hobby? I'm never going to be the best. I'm never going to win every
especially
tournament.
now.
I'm never going to, especially now. And like, there is that sense of like a almost like a community, like a small community, where it's like, you learn to like have a common goal, common individual goals and stuff like that. I don't know. I find that inspirational. So yeah.
Yeah, no, it's extremely heartwarming.
I'm probably going to check that out. That'll be my next personal viewing experience.
I hope
that sounded very,
do.
very nefarious.
My own personal viewing.
Anyway, let's move on to my number 2. Why don't we? Which doesn't help, because my number 2 is slightly nefarious as well.
You've had many personal viewings with this show.
Viewing experience. Yeah, pretty much, because I watched this while I was in college, and I was all by myself.
Oh.
But no. So yeah, my number 2 is Kill la Kill. Trigger's 2014 show, or I think it was even earlier than that. It was
everybody knows Kill la Kill. Everybody knows Kill la Kill.
You say that, but I don't think it's as well known as like Gurren, or like.
I feel like it's amongst anime aficionados. It's like definitely like a top 15, top 20 anime for most people.
Dude, I didn't even see it in the top 100 for my anime list. Maybe I skipped it, but I don't think it was even in the top 100.
Whack.
But anyway.
Whack.
But yeah, Kill la Kill. We were talking, when we were talking about JoJo's, about the confidence that show exudes. And yeah, this show is that, and a good anime budget and team. This show is the truth. Off the fucking wall. It exudes so much confidence in its ideas that it wants to run with. It is shameless, almost to an offensive degree, but like, you kind of accept it because it's not being mean-spirited or like, detrimental to the character's identity about it.
Yeah.
It takes this idea where it's like, yeah, we're gonna do the sailor transformation thing, but it's gonna be even like a bit even more scantily clad.
It's gonna be super hoey.
Yeah, it's gonna be super hoey, and it's like, okay, where are you going with this? And it's like, yeah, because fashion is a statement against the fascists, man. And it's like,
yeah,
oh, okay, I'm following you. And then they hand you the joint, and you're just on the trip, and it's like,
oh man,
woo.
there are days where I'm like terrified that the show was just like created off the pun, like just off the fascist
Dude, it totally
pun.
was. We talked about this.
But like
we
completely...
talked about that being one of the not from like, I mean, it was one of the seeds of development. I don't know. I still so I have a Japanese textbook on the production of Kill la Kill that I cannot read at this moment, but I would like to someday. And when I do, I will get back to you on that.
All right, sounds fair.
It's like a 200. It is a 480 page book on the production of Kill la Kill. But I did hear from one of the interviews about that, so that's why I mentioned that. But yeah, oh man, Kill la Kill is it's such an experience that I don't think Trigger is ever going to be able to capture, for me at least. This might be a case of anybody's first or second Trigger show might, and if they love that sort of mini genre, like any one of them might become this kind of show for them.
Yeah.
But for me it's Kill la Kill. Like the whole cast is like the whole good guy cast is lovable in some way or another form, or relatable, more importantly, in some form or another. And the villain cast is a bunch of diabolical bastards, and you hate them, and I love that, to be honest. there are times you just need your villains to be bastards, and that's fine, without much complexity. And yeah, it's man, I'm kind of getting exasperated again, like I did talking about JoJo's. Because what is there to say about Kill la Kill? We talked about more the themes that it has in our Trigger podcast, which weren't really that developed. I don't know. Maybe I'll spend another day writing about Kill la Kill. But to be honest, before I even do that, I would prefer to get a few more people's opinions on the subject matter. But if you are okay with very risque content, Kill la Kill is just such a fun ride, and it's like not it's not the show with the biggest budget, but it's like one of the most efficiently used budgets I've ever seen.
Yeah, for
where
sure.
It's like, oh, dude, is this scene poorly animated? Well, we're gonna make it hilariously poorly animated. Like, we're gonna have moments where characters are interacting with their character titles, and we're gonna have moments where, characters are clearly on two different vector shades, and that's the point. Like, it's so impressive how much thought there is into almost every frame of Kill la Kill's animation, and that's what kind of bumps it above JoJo's for me, because JoJo's is very well produced, don't get me wrong, but it's definitely a bit, it's stuck because it wants to be true to the manga's panels. And you can't really do that while also animating them. They figured that out when they did the OVAs back in like the 90s, and that it just didn't translate. But Kill la Kill, being an original, production, it's just able to do whatever the fuck it wants, and it just works out really well. So Kill la Kill #2 for me, definitely.
Absolutely, one of the most beautiful, like, incredible action, incredible character design, super great comedy. Really fun, weird, zany world, and just like this kind of strange critique, I guess, of like society and shamelessness.
So here's the thing: like I bring up the idea of like, oh, fashion as a statement against fascism. It's not that deep. Don't get me wrong. This is not like a thought piece, but like unless you're talking about the THOT piece, but it. God, I hate that joke. Anyway, it's an action anime that's smarter than you'd expect it to be.
Yeah. I can see that. Yeah,
you
yeah.
know?
It's
But I wouldn't say it's like a deep piece on something or other.
Trigger has always lived and died by the sort of style over substance, I would say, mantra. But this has just enough substance to keep it in tow while being like one of the most exceptionally stylistic anime I've ever seen in my entire life. But yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, big ups to Kill la Kill for sure. Now for my number 2 anime.
Oof.
It's getting harder as it gets to the top, but I wasn't sure if I even wanted to include this anime, actually. It's just kind of odd. Cause
Really?
it's like in my list at all, yeah, honestly. I was thinking about just making an honorable mention, but after thinking about it, I felt justified. And that is the shonen god, One Piece. So, possibly the greatest shonen of all time. Definitely the one that's dominated the culture for the last 24 years or so.
Yeah.
Since it began. First a part of the big 3, quote unquote, and then just kind of took over since then. It has truly stood the test of time. And the reason why I wasn't sure if I wanted to put it on the list at all was because
it just wouldn't be fair to any other anime.
possibly there's a little bit of that.
Who can compete with that girth?
I know, right? It's just the size. But no, really, it was like one preface. I greatly appreciate the manga more than the anime. I think that something about the pacing and the presentation of the manga, something Oda does when as a mangaka himself, is incredibly unique, and it's fresh, and I think it's much more native in the manga than it is as the anime. I'm not a big like manga over anime guy. I'm not like I'm not pretentious or purist. I'm very much whatever comes to me sort of guy. Mm-hmm. But I feel like there are definitely times in the anime for budget or for letting the manga stretch ahead further, literally logistic reasons or whatever the fuck is the case, where the pacing gets terribly slow. Like Dragon Ball Z purposefully dragging out the scene slow. And that I think is a huge mark against it. However, despite that, I just still can't not put it on the list. It is just too good an experience. There are definitely just too many highs, and it has meant too much to me over the course of my life that I couldn't at least put it at somewhere in the top 5. And I was like, fuck it, number 2. Now for you, I know that you haven't seen this somehow,
right?
Or rather, not really somehow. It's not that unheard. I know many people that are.
For somebody who started as late as me, I wouldn't say it's that weird that I didn't dive into it. But like,
no, not at all.
Honestly, if I was to give anything a try, I'd probably give the manga a try, just because like, I don't know, for some reason in my brain that's different than anime. So if I wasn't watching anime, I could at least be doing something different. And you've already told me how much better the quality is in the manga than it is in the anime, or consistent.
I think the pacing is much more consistent in the anime.
Yeah.
Or excuse me, in the manga. Pardon me. As opposed to the anime, but overall, just as an overall product for anyone who hasn't seen it, it's an incredibly fascinating world. The geopolitics of it are surprisingly deep. From the entire geography of the world, which is completely outlined, from the beginning, from the red line, from entering the grand line, to, the world government, the Marines, the Cypher Pole, which are basically like MI6, to everything, all the pirate groups in between, the Void Century. There's just a lot of incredible world building in the show, incredibly good characters and characterization, and all of it feels great comedy, because the characterization is so good. There's never, there's plenty of comedy in One Piece. I think it's one of the most lighthearted and fun anime because of that. It's very smooth because all the characters who deliver, the jokes it never feels forced or clingy. Everything feels very organic in that nature. And also because of the characterization, I feel like it handles a lot of different emotional tones extremely well. Like tragedy is something that I think is very defining in One Piece, despite being so overwhelmingly positive. There's just so many moments I could just say, and like a One Piece fan would just instantly be transported to the emotional weight of that when they have to say goodbye to the Mary, or when Zoro just says nothing happened, and nothing did not happen. A lot of great, the arc with, again, I know that you didn't read these. I'm really projecting these out into the ether.
But to get more to a concise point, not that you're rambling, but like to fixate on it. The way you describe this and the way I've seen it interpreted by everybody else is that like the appeal of this is that it's a fantastic epic. Like it is a long form, long running, and consistently high quality epic of an adventure. Would that be correct?
Yes. I think that would be absolutely correct, because everything I've said up until this point, the characterization, the world building, all of that makes it a great story, or rather a great manga and a great series, but not a masterpiece. I think One Piece is a masterpiece because it takes all of that and then still tells a fantastic story within that wonderful world with those wonderful characters that it's developed. It's definitely a series that has mastered the art of the long build up, big payoff, template, where you think that in the midst of all the complexity, the hundreds of characters, the crazily detailed world, that when it comes time to get the payoff and to basically consolidate this large story that you've created for each individual arc, somehow every time Oda, takes the Chekhov gun and every time gets everything that he needs to. The conclusions always feel earned. There are some arcs that definitely feel long. It's not perfect, for sure. But more often than not, these incredibly long and intricate build-ups pay off in incredible ways. And it's just a testament, to like
and it's
one man.
It's still ongoing, right?
It is. I mean, last week, in the manga, chapter 980. I don't even know how many anime episodes.
Wow.
And I know many people have been saying it for a long time. I just can't believe, not only is it physically still being produced, but that it's being produced at the quality that it's still being produced. Like, it's just exceptional storytelling. He knows when he wants to give all the details to you. He knows when a strong point in the storytelling is not telling you directly what's something happening. Like many incredible events that happen within the world of One Piece are not on screen. They're just described. And then your characters will eventually very organically run into them. I think a good example of that is just, within it, there's a fight between two admirals in the world government, between Aokiji and Akainu, and it's supposedly one of the greatest fights in One Piece. It's like two huge powerhouses. You never hear about it. You hear a description of the fight, and then eventually the characters of One Piece, like the characters of the Straw Hat crew, end up on the island, Punk Hazard, and you see the aftermath of the fight. The fight has basically split an island in half, where half of it is on fire and half of it is frozen. And so you see, and there's many examples of like how an off-screen event or fight will eventually find its way into the narrative, but like you don't need to see everything explicitly. I think it's a great part of the world where it's constantly evolving and it feels natural, and just so much of the production and design and story of One Piece is just, everything about it has always been very pleasing and just well thought out. And I think that is why, in totality, it is greater than the sum of its parts, which is why I think it's my number 2. In general, I would be close to tempted to put it to 1 if it was just, if the anime itself was just as...
If you weren't so tempted to put absolute crap at number 1.
If I wasn't so tempted to put complete and hot garbage at number 1, in your opinion, I would put One Piece, because One Piece is like, and if the anime was what was better paced, then I would be like, if they threw a bigger budget at it and with a better paced animation, then I would be like, yeah, fuck it, One Piece is the greatest of all time. But today it takes the silver. But I know what your number 1 is, as many may expect it to be. I have no fucking clue. But Why don't you tell people who your favorite anime of all time is? What your favorite anime of all time is? I don't know why I said who.
All right. Well, yeah, this might be cliche, but number one for me is Cowboy Bebop. Like, stop.
Dun, 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 dun.
That's what everybody knows. Everybody knows Tank. Everybody knows a couple like music pieces from the show, but like, to be real, and like, it's funny. I did a little research into Bebop, just to like refresh myself for this discussion, and I didn't realize it was actually canceled. It didn't like really get
I didn't know that either.
Didn't really get the lifespan it wanted to be. But anyway, that might be better for a research discussion going forward. But Bebop was probably one of the first anime I watched, just because of how highly recommended it was, and it sits at the top for me because it kind of set the bar going forward for the premise of show don't tell, of creating an environment through visuals, sounds, and maybe a few bits of text here and there. In like there's let me finish my statement. Using all of those elements to create a scene and a world that feels fully lived in, and that's what Bebop does so well. And I think its premise also really like kind of reaches out to me in particular. I like the idea of drifting in the infinite space, but like nobody's out there really. And the only people you bump into are other people. Like the idea of us being truly alone while not alone at the same time. I don't know, man. There's a lot of pieces written about the show because of its legacy and its cult following. But I think what stands in my mind throughout is just the words that aren't spoken, the backstory for Spike that we aren't fully given, the pain that his partner is going through that he doesn't talk about, the conflict within Maya, like all these characters that feel fully developed while never talking about who they are. They just kind of show up and they are who they are, and you get a full image of what they are. But to be honest, it wouldn't be my favorite if I didn't enjoy who they are, and that's the dingy, live paycheck to paycheck, aimless bounty hunters that they are. That are very culturally, Jesus Christ, culturally wise, but at the same time like degenerates all the same. They're not negligent of the world around them. They just don't want any part of it. They don't want the stable lifestyle. They don't want to just be another person. They want to live on their own terms, and that's what makes them so lonely. And it's just this kind of acceptance that they've come to. It's such a great show to watch and ruminate on, while also being entertaining to an endless degree. There's a term that some people use for jazz, which is a music motif in the show, that jazz is a combination of the words that are played and the words that aren't played. And I feel like that summarizes the show as well, really well. Like, the content's there. Like, you understand the characters and you understand the story for the most part, assuming you're following it. But for everything that is said, there's like 10 questions that don't get answered. And it's not that it's not satisfying. It's just that it gives you that air of mystery that makes you want to come back to the show and look again and see what you missed. And maybe you didn't. Maybe there's just no answer, and maybe that's kind of the point. And I realize I'm sounding like a giant hippie with this show, but like I feel it makes the show really relatable to me. It makes it feel like I'm stepping into the shoes of these characters, not like, you know, being teleported and asking them a million questions. I'm just walking along with them as they go through these episodic adventures in their life. And I think that's made all the better by the show's story, like overarching story, being sparsely and almost randomly placed in between these, like, you know, nonchalant, random episodes of misadventures.
No, I think that a lot of that is at the heart of the appeal for Cowboy Bebop. It's just like being able to relate heavily with these characters that are all defined by loss and their aimless wanderings just feels very natural, feels very organic, and it's the stories that they tell and the journeys that they take and the mood and the production of Cowboy Bebop is so iconic now, and it's so crystallized in the minds of people, and for a reason. It's because it's all incredibly high quality, and I don't know, it just speaks to just like universal questions that we have about ourselves and about each other. I don't know.
I think what helps with that is that, like, you said these characters are kind of defined by loss, but they're not, like, consumed by it. It's the seed of what they are. It's where a lot of their, you know, motivations stem from. But, like, it's not something that they're constantly thinking about or, you know, like, moody about or stuff like that. They're still able to enjoy, like, the upcoming plate of lobster that they ordered until the gunfight starts, or, you know, stuff like that. They're very fun and charismatic people, but they're caught up in these motivations that are rooted at a almost subconscious psychological level, and it's so organic. Like, it's kind of funny to call the show organic when it's so tech punk, like space punk. But it really is, like, despite all these characters living in a future that we probably will never see, you can relate to them. You can relate to that guy who's just living paycheck to paycheck, and, you know, could be doing so much more with his life, but doesn't really want to. And you can you know, you can relate to I don't know. I'm getting lost, but, like, I wouldn't mind doing a bigger piece on Bebop. But for those who have not seen it, I would say give it a shot, and if the aimlessness of the first episode isn't your vibe, that might be it for you, to be honest. Because it really, first episode kind of defines the rest of the show. There's going to be funny moments, there's going to be some really tragic moments, but at the end of the day, you just got to keep on keeping on and, like, kind of appreciate the beautiful and tragic moments that we come across.
I'll say, as far as pilots are concerned, like, in every anime that I've ever seen in my entire life, as far as one that really, like, normally I adhere to a 4-episode rule, but, like, as far as, like, one episode being the quintessential crystallization of what a show is about, like, mood, presentation, everything.
Yeah.
I feel like that first episode of Bebop where he's chasing down the drug runner and the girl, like, that is as perfect as it gets, honestly.
Yeah, that first episode is so fucking good. And, like, oh my god, this is just gonna devolve into us being like, and remember, because the show lays it all out for you. Oh man, such a good job. Honestly, kind of solidified Watanabe as one of my favorite directors and producers in the industry. Has not disappointed me yet. He still continues to really incorporate music very well in each of his productions, but he's never. I don't feel like he's ever really ventured into, aside from Samurai Champloo, he's never ventured into the into this kind of category of you know, like, adventure shows. He kind of stuck to music orientation and stuff like that.
As far as, like, since Cowboy Bebop. And I would say you're right, like, this sort of Odyssey-esque show. Champloo's probably the last one. Besides that, you know, Kids on the Slope, Carol and Tuesday, all fantastic, very well-designed shows, very well-produced shows. Just never really skirt the for lack of a better term, greatness of Bebop.
Yeah,
honestly.
and because I feel like his shows, aside from Space Dandy, which is a farce, like Space Dandy is a farce. It's a lot of fun. It's a fuck ton of fun, but it's a farce at the end of the day, and it stands out from Watanabe's other pieces. But
it's definitely very different.
He doesn't like to shy away from what he feels is a realistic portrayal of a situation. Like if somebody's fighting a mafia group, they will get shot. Like that is what's gonna happen, and I feel like that gritty, without being without being cruel, that gritty portrayal just is not very marketable, unfortunately, because I thought Bebop did commercially very well, but apparently I'm seeing it kind of got canceled, and so did, and Shampoo also did terribly when it came out. It was not very popular at all.
I think that the Watanabe's work extremely has like a huge appeal in the West and just zero appeal in the East. There is nothing about Bebop, Shampoo, and its predecessors or its successors, excuse me, that appeal to the Japanese and Eastern audience, whereas in the West we love that. We love stories that have that sort of groundedness. We love the realism of it. I don't think that stories like that, like Monster, like Berserk,
but Berserk's like enormously popular in Japan.
I would say Berserk.
So what the fuck are you talking about?
Yeah. I've take away Berserk, but Monster definitely. I would say don't have a huge appeal in the East.
I think it's more like where the markets stand, because I feel like I can't say how that was able to develop over in the West better than the East, but because I think there are plenty of darker, grittier stories in Japan and the other Asian countries, but it's more just where the animation market is.
I think by comparison, though, to something that is lighter and campier, the market is just much more huge for that stuff in the East than it is in the West. I think it is some sort of taste via hemisphere, but I guess that I'd have to research that a little bit more.
I think you're taking some wild guesses there, and I don't fully agree with them, but I can't disagree with them at the same time. Because apparently one of the things that got Bebop canceled was the portrayal of violence. So. And it's funny because they says that, and I'm like, Bebop's not that violent of a show. I mean, there are times people get shot, don't get me wrong, but it's not like Mononoke where the fucking dudes' heads just come right off and stuff like that. So I don't know. I can't say what exactly are the details behind it, but I don't know. I don't think I'd be as interested in anime in general if it weren't for Bebop. And this is really stupid to say, but I'm gonna say it. Every time I watch a new show that I have no idea what I'm getting into, I secretly hope it'll be the next Bebop for me. You know what I mean?
No, that's fine.
I hope to recapture that feeling of wow, of sitting back, finishing that last episode, and needing the next day off just to think about life.
That's that desire for any fucking story or any sort of artistic experience. If you listen to a song and it's profound, you want every song to match up to that song, whatever it is. You watch something, or whether you watch a film, you watch a TV show, you want it to be as profound as that one show that was profound. It's not that strange,
I know. I'm just saying. I'm saying, but it's also an unfair and unrealistic expectation to ever have for all these other shows. That's the reason why I say it's silly. It's one of those things that I recognize as being silly, but I think my subconscious just desperately wants. And to be fair, Shampoo gets really close, and the second half of Trigun gets kind of close. But there's a reason why I didn't put those two on my top 5, and it's not because they aren't worthy of being top 5, but it's that they had a bit too much similar to Bebop, and Bebop overtakes them both easily in my mind.
Yeah. A lot of honorable mentions that we just would throw out there, Trigun for sure, fantastic. Naruto.
The English,
just for my
the English
childhood.
dub though. I hate that Japanese dub of Trigun.
Oh yeah, I love the dub of the English dub of Trigun.
Oh, the English dub is great, but I can't stand
yeah.
I don't know who it is that does the voice for the protagonist in Trigun in Japan, but I hate that person. I hate that voice so fucking
I don't know who
much.
that is. I know that isn't it Johnny Young Bosch who does the English one? Right?
Yeah, he does. I wonder if that was one of his first big ones, because that was a really good performance by him.
Yeah, he was a little bit fun.
Yeah, he's always good.
Oh well, but moving on. Final anime we will be talking about today. My number one. Your one of your least favorite anime, but for lack of a better definition of it, and just what I came up with last night, but with truth to it, is Code Geass.
The original. Both
Both
the
Geass,
original and R2, correct?
Yes, both. Yeah, the totality of the story of Geass, Code Geass, and Code Geass R2.
Would you say that the new movie sits with them, or is that a separate entity?
So I have seen Code Geass.
I know, we talked about it on this podcast.
Yeah, of the resurrection, and no.
Okay. So, to be clear...
It's a quality product, but
to be
it's
clear, your top one is Code Geass, Lelouch Rebellion, and R2.
Yes, thank you. Yes, that would be the product we are discussing right now. So yeah,
cool.
Now
you never know. Like when I say I like Metal Gear, I'm talking about 1, 2, and 3.
That's fair.
You need to clarify. But anyway, you want to talk about Code Geass, and I need to give you your space. So please,
it's okay.
Tell the people.
You laugh. I understand. It is pretty schlocky. Even in my own heart, I'm like, you could probably do better than this, Brando. Come on. But but really, it's just really appealing in a lot of ways to me, and it really stuck in my mind for so long. There's just a lot of elements of how successfully they wrote the anti-hero story. The intelligent, sociopathic protagonist that is Lelouch. And everything that the series addresses, from like the moral dilemma that come with his sort of path in life, does might make right sort of situations, do the ends justify the means, all the things that he kind of presents you, the moral quandaries that he faces as a leader of the rebellion, the character development throughout. Basically, he is sort of a dual protagonist alongside Suzaku as well, and the way they mature, the way he kind of goes from the sort of scorn, just an exiled prince, to having developed this vision that is both at times selfish and selfless, and then eventually becomes altruistic by the end. But all the struggles in between, and the realism of the show, despite some moments of not realism, like there's some really stupid. There's like I think a time when like Suzaku like runs up a wall, does like a Tatsumaki Senpyukaku, and then like kicks a machine gun out of somebody's hand.
That shit's dope. I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
So like, I no, I need to let you finish your thought before I go into it. This is the one show that I feel like both of us can actually talk about, like BEASTARS and all that other shit. It's like one of us is more passionate about than the other, and we're fine with that. But Code Geass, oh man,
there's definitely a valley between you and I, but that's okay.
It's a fucking train wreck.
It is, but it's a beautiful train wreck. It's a train wreck that I'm really attached to. So yeah, just to finish my thought, like the realism of it, the real actual like cause and effect of everything, like of war and how he devastates landscapes, how he devastates lives when it comes to the decisions that he makes. And I think one of the biggest sticking points when it comes to Geass are the very memorable plot twists and cliffhangers that are just extremely effective at becoming some of the most poignant memories I have of this show. Whether it's the Princess Yuffie massacre, it's or just that near the end, the literal ending of the show, how they decided to zero requiem everything. All of it, I think, is just a masterclass in combining so many different elements in a rather succinct story. You've got political intrigue, high school drama, like you've got you've got comedy, you've got mechs, you've got just so much happening. A coming of age story, a really
gratuitous nudity.
yeah, just like very distinct design. Obviously is produced and done by Sunrise, which does all of the Gundam series, and then you have, I think, partial writing and definitely the character designs for everything was done by Clamp, which is known for Tsubasa Reservoir Chronicles, XX Holic, just X. I think that they did Cardcaptor Sakura as well. I may be mixing that last one, but I know the former two are correct. But yeah, they have a very distinctive character design model, which they basically imparted onto all the characters of Code Geass. The very slender, angular designs, the big eyes, but very iconic now. But yeah, no, just so much of it, I feel like, plays into my tastes, and at times, obviously, I definitely acknowledge the more like cheesy, campy elements of the show, where it's like definitely up its own ass at times. But it doesn't matter, because I guess that's the sort of taste that I have. Because like you were mentioning Metal Gear Solid, we both know how fucking up your ass Metal Gear Solid can be.
Oh yeah.
But I still, but it's in the same way, I think that, and I guess to turn it all full circle, in the same way, JoJo and Kill la Kill can be so honest about how about how fucking silly it is. At the same time, it owns it in a way that I feel is very honest.
How dare you turn my love against me?
I think that it's very honest about how sort of unrealistic perhaps at times, but also realistic it is about portraying certain moral and societal issues. Anyway, you have thoughts. Go ahead. I can tell you're a dog off the chain.
I can hear Brando like going into his bunker. Really,
let me just close the door.
There's not much. To be honest, my biggest peeve against the series is the twist about the dad towards the end, about the Emperor and the power he has, like the reset. Okay. That, and like the underlining like subconscious of humanity. That,
like killing God part, and
the jump of that shark is way too much for me. To be honest,
that's where they crossed the line.
It really is, and it's something I made. You know, it's an artificial line I made, but they crossed it. And now I don't like them anymore.
I can reconcile that. I understand that at that point it leaves the realm of the worldliness of it.
Tactical, like we're gonna take this city and use this tactic for this city, and then suddenly you have and now this is how you take over all of humanity, just like that. And it's like, no, that's I don't know. It's like it feels like that point for me really abandons the build up of the rest of the show.
I will say that it is probably one of the lesser appeals.
That they barely touch it.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. They kind of recoil against it after they implement it.
Yeah.
Which is like, it's not more or less offensive, I would say, than like continuing on. I mean, I'm glad they didn't really pursue that thought thread too hard. Yeah. I think it's a little bit too grandiose. I agree. Like when you get to the point, like what is the Emperor's master plan? And it's like, I'm going to Geass God. Yeah, basically, I'm gonna dead space this and create the human, the single human mind or whatever. Yeah, and I'm like, okay, we've entered into a new realm. Because I mean, we were dealing with some mysterious magical elements where it's almost preferable that they remain that way. Yeah, and now we've basically exacerbated the potential of them now. Yeah. And it does kill a little bit of the nuance of everything. Yeah. But they do recoil against that, thankfully. Yeah. And I think they make it into a decent character moment for Lelouch.
I feel like it's
doing so.
I feel like it's such a. I mean, it's obvious from where I'm talking that it's such a black mark on the show for me, because I actually was really enjoying it for a time, and then it went to that, and I was just like, I'm gonna finish the show, but I'm not gonna like it. That's where it kind of went. So yeah, I agree with your sentiment, and I brought up Metal Gear for a specific reason, because that's what this show reminds me a lot of. where it brings up a lot of interesting concepts and cool ideas. But again, like so many other shows like this, Metal Gear, the Zero Escape series, which I don't know if you ever touched, but like it has similar story problems that those two series have, where they tend to just like, there's some point, especially either the third or fourth like arc of those series, that like they just jump the gun so hard that it just makes all relevancy seem inconsequential. And it's just like, I don't know, for me, you really got to keep things grounded. Like, there's one show that makes fun of jumping the shark, and I adore it for it, and it's Samurai Flamenco. But like, other than that, like I don't know. I'm sorry to be shitting. I'm sorry to be shitting on your top one, your favorite anime series, but like for me, it's always been,
I knew how you felt a long time ago, and honestly, like I said, it'll always be a top 5 anime for me, always. And again, this list malleable. Tomorrow it might be One Piece at the number 1. The next day it could be something else. God knows. And who knows? Maybe I'm gonna watch something in the next few years that overtakes all of them. Or one of the animes I'm watching, maybe like My Hero Academia evolves into something that I just appreciate more than everything on this list. But today, this is what it is.
Code Geass.
These are
top one.
For me, that's what I feel in my heart at the moment.
Hey man, good for you. But yeah, did you want to get into honorable mentions or?
Honorable mentions could take forever,
really?
But shoot out a few off the top of your head if you'd like.
Okay, I mentioned it earlier. ReZero, probably my favorite use of a time travel mechanic. That and a really good cast of characters who I hated from their design and I've learned to love over the course of the show. So I'm really looking forward to that 3rd season. What else is there? Honestly, stuff similar that I mentioned, Trigun, other Trigger animes, stuff like that. Also really, really good stuff. But that's pretty much it. Nothing too far out of the blue. I really enjoyed the Persona 4 anime. It's almost as good, if not better, than the games. So,
wow.
Yeah, it's weird because the Persona 5 anime is like the opposite, where it's like the worst thing ever.
Yeah.
Anyway.
I'll throw a few out there. Shout outs, honorable mention, Gurren Lagann, obviously.
Oh, I said Trick. I guess it's Gainax, isn't it? Fuck.
I guess, yeah. Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood. Sorry, didn't make the list. Dragon Ball original, not Z.
Yeah, you are a fan of original Dragon Ball.
I am a big fan of Hajime no Ippo.
Yeah,
big
Ippo
fan
too.
Of that.
Yeah, big fan of that. I never finished it, so that's why I didn't put it on the list, because I didn't finish it, but yeah. It's good
Naruto for my whole childhood.
God, I'm so glad. I'm so glad we could argue about Code Geass and not Naruto. Like, because Naruto, I would have had some serious fucking problems if that was one of your favorites. I think that show's morals are fucked, and that show is like
a conversation for another day, probably.
Yeah, we should probably wrap this
Hunter.
up before I kill any other audience members that we have.
Yeah. Hunter x Hunter, definitely want to throw that out there too. Another fantastic series. Yeah, and so many more that we could keep going. I could do this literally all day, like My Hero Academia, fucking even a little bit of Made in Abyss, and fucking like I was thinking about putting that on. But yeah, list goes on. So many fantastic anime we've seen. But
neither of us
these
listed.
are the 5.
Neither of us listed a comedy. What would you say is your favorite comedy anime?
Ooh,
just off the top of your head. Fuck it.
I don't know. Favorite comedy? It's kind of hard. So like in the moment, some days it's Konosuba.
For me, it's probably Grand Blue. Grand Blue is probably my favorite.
Grand Blue. I was gonna say it's probably Grand Blue, but there's a couple other. There's a couple other good ones. The joke. No. I mean, it's so debaucherous. It's so fun, but like I
think it just tickles the right cores that I have.
A couple other I'm thinking of right now: Hinamatsuri, Konosuba, and School Rumble.
Kaguya is great.
Kaguya is a fun rom-com as well.
But no, I'd say top comedy for me, since I didn't put one on my top 5, is definitely Grand Blue, without a doubt.
Yeah, Grand Blue is fantastic.
Yeah.
Grand Blue, not Grand Blue.
Oh shit!
Yeah, just want to throw it out there.
GRAND Blue.
Yeah.
If
I think it's Grand Blue Dreaming.
Grand Blue Dreaming. If you're watching Scuba Divers, you're on the right show. If you're watching Knights, it's the wrong one.
Yeah. You want a bunch of drunk college dudes on an island. Like that's the ideal. That's what you're looking for.
You got some ladies there who are also debaucherous as fuck.
Yeah. So you're looking for a Grand Blue. But yeah, no, that's a fantastic show. And these are all fantastic anime. It was fun to kind of powwow about them, reminisce about what we think is great. And obviously, one thing that we both would like is for all of you who somehow made it to the end of this hour and 40 plus minute podcast. Obviously, big thank you. But to shout out below your top 5. If you can cut it down to that, let us know your thoughts, your impressions. We'd love to hear it. We'd love to maybe talk about some of those anime in particular. So leave a comment, leave a like if you had a good time. And any final thoughts, Chris, before we close up shop?
No. If you guys liked us, follow us on Twitter. We have the Otaku Remix at Otaku Remix. You can find my individual Twitter there. Brando does not have one, but we'll put his Instagram on there if you want to see his beautiful modeling face. And
I'll get a Twitter one of these days.
Yeah. Anyway, but yeah, that's pretty much it, guys. Thank you for listening if you have gotten this far. And seriously, give us your top 5. Maybe I'll find something else that I'm looking for. And you know what? Fuck it. If anybody can find me my next Cowboy Bebop, fucking put it in the link down below. And
please do.
We'll see you guys next time, I guess.